Do you remember on Halloween when you would get different candies like Reese's or chocolate, but then you got Good and Plenty? And you thought to yourself, what is this and why is this in here and who eats it? Well, there's a whole line of liquors that are just like the taste of that candy. Licorice forward, but they are memorable beyond anything you could possibly imagine. And I have 3 anise-flavored liquors that will certainly stand out from the rest. Hi, and welcome to Gabe's Liquor Cabinet. My name is Gabe Bauer, and I am the host and founder of Top Shelf History because I love making cocktails inspired by history. And as such, I've amassed an incredibly large alcohol collection with over 180 bottles of liquor. May seem excessive, but it has allowed me to come up with some awesome cocktails, and now I want to take you guys through all of the weird and crazy different bottles of liquor that I have in my collection, especially the unique ones all the way to the standard ones, and kind of give you guys my thoughts on each. Today we're focusing on anisettes. Anisettes are very popular throughout Europe and even the Middle East, and we have 3 different types of anisettes here before you today. Now, I don't know if you're a fan of licorice or if you're a fan of anise pods, but if you are, then this is the liquor and the liquor cabinet for you, because let me tell you, all of these are going to be very heavy in that flavor department. And we have 3 different styles here. Now, mind you, anise is used under different names. Sambuca for Italy, OUZO in Greece, or ARAK in the Middle East, or anisette if you're in France. But we have a standard anisette here, an OUZO, and an ARAK. What's interesting is that each of these are a little different in their own way. So let us get into it. Normally, traditionally, when it comes to anisettes, they're enjoyed over ice with a great amount of dilution of water. That way you're not getting overpowered by the sheer flavor bombs that these types of alcohols produce. But we will start with our first one, which is HIRAM Walker. Now, if you're not sure if you like anisette, or if you aren't sure if you like anise flavored drinks or anise flavored liquors in general, I think HIRAM Walker is a great start. Forgive my pronunciation of HIRAM's name. I don't know if it's HIRAM or HIRAM. HIRAM Walker was a Canadian entrepreneur. Actually, the distillery for HIRAM Walker is in Canada, and I believe that this is made, actually it's made in the USA. This is actually made in Fort Smith, Arkansas, so how about that? I am corrected, but this does carry a decent amount of alcohol at 60 proof. It's 30% alcohol by volume. Now, each one of these is clear because they aren't being added with any other additional herbs, or at least any other coloring additional herbs. Some of them may add fennel or even licorice. In certain circumstances, these ones don't. But I know the OUZO does have, I think, 15 different herbs and spices, but with the standard anisette, the really big forward tasting ingredient is going to be the anise pods. So we're going to start out with the HIRAM Walker. Now, right off the bat, that smells like black licorice. I don't know if you guys have had black licorice, and if you have, do you like it? Most people don't, especially in America. But if you haven't, would you be willing to try? I mean, I know it's pretty bold flavor, has a very long and disputed reputation among people who enjoy black licorice, but you know, you can't knock it till you try it. Mind you, I don't like it personally, mostly because it's so potent with flavors like this. I'm not the biggest fan of anise, but I think when it's applied properly, it can make for an excellent addition to any cocktail, but you want to use them in small amounts. But let's give a try to HIRAM Walker's anisette. Delightfully palatable, actually. The smell is much more potent than the actual taste. The taste is very sweet. This is sugar forward, as with most anisettes, they're typically heavier on the sugar. For example, Sambuca has a pretty high sugar content, which is why it's fairly popular, and is also why you want to dilute it with water usually, or some either form of alcohol if you want to get closer to that buzz, or with another diluting element, whether it's juices or something else. That way you can negate some of the really big sugariness on there. But on the tongue, very sweet, subtle amounts, at least more subtle than expected, I should say, in the flavor of the anise. It's actually quite delicious, in my opinion. Then the taste kind of comes up, and you get the smell back. It almost comes up through the mouth and out the nose as you breathe it out. You get more of that anise licorice flavor, right? But it's not really on the tongue, which is quite nice, actually. It's almost more aromatic than it is flavorful on the taste buds, I should say. Its bark is harsher than its bite. There is no bite, no burn here, 30% alcohol. You're not gonna get a lot of that with this. I think this, maybe a ½ ounce max, will do excellent in other cocktails, whether it's gin, which is a botanical flavored liquor in its own right. I think if you can balance that properly with other botanicals and maybe some tartness, mind you really have to play with this, because these are kind of so powerful that they're meant to be enjoyed straight up. So you really have to see where you can incorporate them in small elements so that they can make their presence known but not overpower the drink. And that's the hard part when you're mixing with anisettes, but it is absolutely possible. I've certainly done it myself, for example. Next one we're going to get into is OUZO of PLOMARI by It looks like it says Isidozos, but I think it's Isidoros Arvanitis. So Isidoros Arvanitis, I believe, is the original entrepreneur who founded, or at least came up with OUZO of PLOMARI. He established his recipe with high quality ingredients coming from the Greek island of Lesbos. 15 different ingredients that go into this, including fennel and the anise pods, of course, and a couple of others. It's been around since 1894, so I would say it's pretty good, or at least it has a good reputation of it, and it's distilled in copper pots, which is really, really cool. So it has a beautiful tradition and history behind it, a beautiful bottle as well. I actually really like this logo. It looks like a flywheel, and the gold and the blue, it's absolutely Greek in every way, and I think it will match its taste. It looks fantastic, great clear color. It's got the Greek lettering on the back, so the bottle is very, very cool, and I can't wait to actually try this. I haven't tried this one yet, so let's pour this one out. And put this back up here. Now on the color, as with all of these, very clear. It's going to do with any, gonna adapt to any cocktail that you're gonna make, essentially. Whether you want a different color, it'll do a great job with that because it's clear. If you're looking for a clean looking martini-like a cocktail maybe, then this is going to do great for that as well. But like I said, with all of these, more likely you're gonna want to use these in very small amounts. That way, presence, not overpowering. But let's give a smell. Already, I can tell that this is a little spicier than this one. This one is anise, straight up. This one, I can smell the fennel. So subtle, but it's right at the end on the nose. It almost reminds me a little bit of cardamom, but sharper. If you guys have ever smelled cardamom, kind of has a similar aromatic note, but it has some differentiations, of course. But at least that first hit reminds me of it, because this isn't just anise, of course. So a little bit spicier, and I think this is going to make for a nice distinction from our HIRAM Walker. So let's give it a taste. Not nearly as sweet, bitter on the back end. This is 40% alcohol now. So This isn't, right? This is 40, yeah, this is 40% alcohol. So now we're in the 80 proof. This is 30%. So this is obviously not gonna be as sweet, much more, not bitter, let's say. I would put it more towards a herbal, spicy note here. Hits harder. Remember how I said that you more smell this than necessarily taste it on the tongue? You taste this one on the tongue, but spicy. More than just the anise. Again, I taste the other herbs coming in, the fennel on the back end. You really start to get all of those flavors. Initially up front on the tongue, slight numminess, very, very little. Not nearly the same as, let's say, a whiskey, but as it goes towards the back of the tongue, it hits the sides, and then the very back where you start to get the bitterness sensors in your taste buds, you really start to pick up on all of those herbs and spices, and it is quite good, actually. I think this one is a little bit more nuanced, but it is more forward in its profile and its flavor profile. So where this one may be easier to mix with, this one I think is better on its own. If you poured this over ice, you put a little water in it, it would be great if you like licorice, anise flavored forward drinks. But if you're incorporating this into another cocktail, it would be interesting to see how we would develop this. Now I tried actually one time, I tried with my Atlantis drink to try to incorporate this one, but with the flavors and the colors that I was trying to emit with that particular type of drink, I wasn't able to incorporate the OUZO properly because the OUZO was just throwing the entire flavor profile off because it's so strong. So you really need something that's going to complement licorice and look for flavors that are along those same lines. More spicy and a little bit more bitter. Maybe an aperitif goes well here, right? You know, maybe you mix this with Campari and add some more bite. If you really like bitter, this is great. It's very refreshing as well. So if you did this with, let's say, a vodka, or if you did this with maybe not a dry gin, maybe something like Aviation, where it's not gonna have so much of a dry note behind it, and you put in a little bit of this and maybe an additional bitter, maybe a bitter citrus, maybe you throw in some citrus bitters like grapefruit bitters, which I have over here, or maybe some orange bitters, you may have a fairly delicious summer drink that you may be able to add a smidgen of lemon. I'll give that a try and I'll let you guys know what that ends up tasting like, but very, very spicy, and I like that. It's very different and certainly of high quality. Mr. Iridoros Arvanitis did a great job here, and there's a reason why this has been around since the 19th century. The final one we have is ARAK RAZZOUK, which is made in Beirut, Lebanon. And I first found this bottle when I was trying to make a drink on the exodus of the Jews out of Egypt based on the Bible story. And I was trying to figure out if there was any alcohol that I could incorporate from the Middle East. But a lot of the Middle East is Sunni Islam, and they are primarily dry. So they don't really produce alcohol. The countries that do have alcohol, it's mostly for their tourists. For example, there are certain areas in Egypt, like in Cairo, where they may have like a bar, but it's almost specifically for tourists, and they only serve, like, let's say, certain beers that are imported. They don't really make their own alcohol. Obviously, if it's against your beliefs, then that makes sense, right? So finding in a Middle East liquor was difficult as it was. But while I was at my liquor store, I came across ARAK RAZZOUK, and it had the beautiful Arabic script that we see on top that comes from Lebanon. And Lebanon actually does produce this, and it's wonderful. And what's very interesting about this particular anisette is that it is different from these two in the fact that it is a grape spirit. So we have a grape spirit that is the basis of this anisette. Now these not necessarily, they don't make the clear distinction that they utilize a grape spirit, and I think I can pick this one up. It has almost like a wine consistency. If you guys have ever had pisco, which is a high proof grape liquor that comes from Peru that I really like a lot, and I think is a wonderful mixer. If you ever have a pisco sour, for example, it's one of Peru's biggest drinks and cocktails that have come out of that country. It's delicious, it's fantastic. I highly suggest trying it. Similarly, I smell the grape here right off the bat. There are elements of almost wine, and it's so interesting, and it's so different from the others. So I actually did incorporate this in my drink about the Exodus, which is called the Promised Land. I'll make sure to link that below. That I think you guys should try out. We actually incorporated this with Bailey's and Jack Daniel's honey. And let me tell you, this was still the big player there, but it made it a little bit more palatable. I think if you play with the different amounts of ARAK and the OUZO and the Anisette, you can find a happy balance in there, and man, it makes those drinks just so memorable. I think that's the best thing about Anisette, is that they are memorable because their flavor is so bold. But what I'm really enjoying about this is that each of these are Anisettes, but they're each very different. Now with this one, this is 50% alcohol by volume. So we have gone up as well in the potency of each of these alcohols, and that's going to affect our taste, and that's going to affect the aftertaste, and it's going to affect the way we feel. With both of these, I didn't really have any burn at all. A little bit more of a punch in terms of the flavor with the OUZO, but not really a burn. We're going to see what happens here with the ARAK though. Right off the bat, like I said, you can smell that grape. It's subtle, but it's there. If you smelled like grape juice, just pure grape juice, whether it's a white grape or it's, you know, that like Concord grape juice, you know that smell. You can pick it out in this, right behind the anise. Like it's just subtly under that, but you can pick it out, and it's so interesting because it gives it such a unique aromatic note. Now I want to give it a taste. I wanted to let this one sit on the tongue so I could get any additional flavors. And as you can tell, this is absolutely 50%. Whoo! Whoo! ARAK hits hard, man. Absolutely worth trying, I think, just for the experience, but it hits hard. At 50% alcohol, this one does have a numbing effect on the tongue. Wherever it's touching the tongue, it's giving me a subtle tingle, numbiness. The roof of my mouth is getting it a little bit, and there's a slight burn that is coming down into my chest as well right now. So a little bit of a delayed reaction, about 3 seconds maybe before you start to feel that burn, but it warms you up. Makes you feel alive a little bit. I love it. On the flavor profile, the anise, very forward here. I think this is the most bold because I think the grape kind of just complements it enough to where it allows the anise to just take off and go to the moon. If you love licorice, this is the taste you want. This is as licorice as you can get in terms of that flavor. But also there is that subtle sweetness. Right on the first taste, you get that subtle grape, right? So you get kind of like a dark fruit flavor that underlies it, and then the anise just pulls in the moment that you swallow. So because it's almost like the top note. So like the base note is that grape liquor, how'd they call it? Grape spirits. And then the moment that grape spirits start to dissipate and you're left with the aroma, there's the aniseed. And it's potent and it's powerful and it stays with you, but it's delightful. One thing I really like that I didn't think I would like, because I never really enjoyed licorice or anise flavored things, is that the staying power is longer, but it's delightful. As it sits on your tongue, it's quite good and refreshing, and it's almost like having a breath of fresh air. I know it's a little weird to think about, especially because Americans aren't very high on licorice, for example, but certainly worth trying. Each one of these is so different, but I think they can each add a wonderful extra element to your cocktail. If you wanted something a little sweeter and you don't want too much of that anise flavor, Anisette by HIRAM Walker, great addition. If you want something a little spicier, right? Maybe you want to add it to a more savory flavored drink. OUZO of PLOMARI, great touch. If you want your drink to have that memorable impact of anise with a slightly bittersweet undertone, and you can find other flavors that work with that. I actually think that if you wanted more of a licorice flavored aged rum, sacrilege, I know, but you gotta give these a try when you're testing new drinks. I think this would go well with dark, fruity rums. Definitely give it a try. I think each of these are fantastic. Use them sparingly, but they will make for an absolutely memorable drink. But thank you so much for enjoying this edition of Gabe's Liquor Cabinet. As with all things here at Top Shelf History, remember, history is better with a drink. Cheers.